We would invite all who would care to join us in standing for the recitation of the Lord's Prayer, followed by a moment of silence. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Now 7 o'clock. Shelby City Council meeting is called to order. Please join me in pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May be seated. Roll call, please, Mr. Crum.
Mr. Robb.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Gates.
Here.
Mr. Martin.
Present.
Mr. McLaughlin. Here.
I will now entertain with a motion to dispense with the reading of the journal from September 8, 2020. So moved. Second. We have a motion by Mr. Robb and a second by Mr. Martin to dispense with the reading of the journal from September 8, 2020. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Robb.
Yay.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay. That motion passes. We now come to the time for public comment. To the best of my knowledge, we have received no public comment at City Hall to be shared. Does anyone have anyone else, maybe correspondence that came through that you'd like to share during this public comment time? Yes.
Good evening, Kathy Webb, Director of the Marvin Memorial Library here in Shelby.
Would
I'd
you
like
state
to
your
bring-
name and address, please, too, Kathy, if you would, please? Your
Home or work?
Your home address.
36 North Gamble, Apartment B.
Okay, thank you.
Come to bring you news of a grant application for the Shelby City Council Minutes Digitization Project. Christina Drain has been working on that. She's ill and unable to be here this evening. Best thing I can do is read the description that she has written. With a grant of $3,491.20 from the History Fund, the City of Shelby will digitize and transcribe over a 24-month period about 5,800 pages from 13 volumes of City Council minutes and corporation records and ordinances dating from 1863 to 1934. The digitization project will involve external partners, Marvin Memorial Library, and the Richland County Shelby chapter of the Ohio Genealogical Society. Because the books are nearly 90 to more than 150 years old, a professional digitization company will be hired to scan the books so as not to break the binding or tear fragile pages. Once scanned, the images will be uploaded to the Ohio Memory Project. The library holds a membership subscription to Ohio Memory. About half of the books of minutes are handwritten. Genealogy chapter volunteers will transcribe the handwritten books to place alongside the images on Ohio Memory. This is an existing, ongoing online project where they will be freely available to the public, to you. This is really significant. It encompasses the time when Shelby was incorporated as a town. It is the time that covers several wars and the Great Depression. It covers the 1921 city, becoming a city and charter. It's very significant to have these things available because they are in books in City Hall, not particularly in archival storage. This makes them available to the community, to you, to research what has come in the past government of this city, for teachers as primary documents to share local history. We are excited about this. Joe Geist will be our project director. Brian Crum is willing to serve as bookkeeper. Christina is doing a great deal of volunteer work in working with the vendors and also supervising transcription. I will receive the data submitted to the Ohio Memory Project and provide descriptive metadata. We have volunteers from the genealogy group who will transcribe nearly half of this material. So the grant is due October 1st. It is ready to submit, and we look forward to getting results on this.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. Will you be staying around for that piece of legislation in case there may be more questions? Thank you. Also, in public comment, we have Richland Area Chamber of Economic Development President and CEO Jody Perry with us this evening, and also Jessica Griffin, our Economic Development Liaison. And if you both want to come and maybe state your name and address, and perhaps, I think we found out last time, it'd be better probably during the discussion of legislation to have you speak at that time. But yes, Mr. Martin.
Considering their presence and limited time, I would like to move to suspend the rules to consider ordinance number 23, 2020 at this time.
Second.
So we have a motion on Mr. Martin and a second on Mr. Robb to suspend the rules and move to, under legislation to ordinance number 23, 2020. There in discussion on this motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robb?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
The motion to suspend passes, so we will now, Mr. Crum, if you will, read ordinance number 23, 2020.
Ordinance number 23, 2020, authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Richland Area Chamber of Commerce to assist the city in the planning and administration of the CARES Act funds devoted to the Small Business Community Fund to assist in recovery and declaring an emergency.
Mayor, I move that the rule requiring that an ordinance be read on 3 separate occasions be suspended.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin that the rule requiring that ordinance be read on 3 separate occasions be suspended. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robb?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
That motion passes.
I move the ordinance be taken up passed.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin for the passage of ordinance number 23, 2020. Discussion? And again, we will have Ms. Perry and Mr. Griffin on hand to answer questions as we move into the discussion of this motion. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. At this time, I would like to hear from Ms. Perry regarding the legislation. I know she came to be with us this evening, and I certainly appreciate that. To kind of hear her vantage point for this and how the process is going with other municipalities and Richland County as a whole.
All right, thanks for having me this evening. Do you still need my address?
Pardon?
Do you need me to say my address?
It would be preferable.
Okay, that's fine. 55 North Mulberry Street is the chamber address.
Okay. Okay, good.
Okay, you can have my phone if you want.
That's fine.
Okay, well, thank you for having me tonight. So I apologize that I wasn't here last time to answer questions, but happy to answer questions that you have tonight. So let me just kind of do a broad overview of the program. So you've seen this happening in, or perhaps you've seen this happening in many other communities around Ohio and around the country. In response to the coronavirus pandemic, communities, cities, counties are putting up money to assist their small businesses. And so we watched this back in the spring, and of course, you know, there was not money back in the spring to do that. The federal government, of course, had PPP and other programs. But when the coronavirus, the CARES Act funding started to come to the local municipalities, we started a conversation with the county commissioners is where it started, to see if there was an avenue to take some of that money and bring it to local small businesses. So that actually dates back to the middle of July. We worked over the next about 6 weeks, I guess, from when the program launched to put it in place. We modeled our program off a similar one that is happening in Summit County and City of Akron, and they have multiple municipalities going into that. They put a fairly extensive process in terms of the application, what they were asking for small businesses, to determine need in that. So we looked at their program, we tweaked it, so we did, you know, knowing to start, we had $250,000 that the commissioners were committed to putting in. However, I've been on the front row, as you have, with small businesses during this time, and I know there's certainly many more that were going to need the money than $250,000 was going to be able to meet the needs of. So you know, we thought about the sizes of businesses and that, so that we could really target who probably wasn't, who didn't have access to other funds during that time. So that's what we did. The program ended, or ended up targeting businesses that had 20 FTE employees or less, which is full-time equivalent. So they could have more than 20 employees. It just depends on their mix of full-time and part-time. The other major thing that we put on it was $1.5 million in revenue from 2019 or less. So again, really targeting the smaller of the small businesses with it. It was for-profit businesses only. So that application period has happened now, and it has turned out to be what we thought it would happen, which is we have a lot more applications than we can fund. The City of Mansfield, I'm sure you saw, has committed $250,000 to it. The City of Ontario has committed $25,000. The Village of Plymouth is committing money. I don't have the exact amount. And it is working through, in fact, maybe even tonight, the Village of Lexington as well as the Village of Melville. So we're pulling sources together. We're having discussions with both the City of Mansfield and Richland County about putting additional funds in, because even with funds from all of the other cities and villages, there's a shortage. We had 273 local businesses apply for the funds, and it was 7,500 for businesses with 2 or more employees and 2,500 with less than 2 employees. That was the levels. What we did was, and I think that has been given to you. You know, there's a lot of rules and things that go over it. Obviously, there's a lot of additional work for the chamber to do this, so we did institute and asked for an administrative fee. It was for any community that was giving more than $50,000 into the fund groups. And that fee was set at 10%. That is what the county and the city have agreed to. And the reasoning behind that really was there's a ton of work going into this, and it's work that certainly we're not, you know, there's multiple staff involved in it, myself, Jessica, Barrett, as well as, well, anyways, you don't need to know all their names, but there's 3 others that are about to be pulled in. So there's been a bunch of work up to this point, which was kind of getting the program off the ground, putting the mechanisms in place, and now we're going to issue the money, and we need to make sure everything is in line with the CARES Act. So we have to do the underwriting for the grants. We have to, when a business is given the money, they will sign an agreement with us. We'll give them the money, and then they have to actually come back and show us canceled checks and proof that they spent the money the way that they did. We have to make sure that money is spent in alliance or in that it lines up with the CARES Act funding, that they're not, going out and spending it on something that they're not supposed to. That all has to take place by the end of November, so that we can turn around, give a report out to the county and the city and any other city that participates, so that you can then enter a report back up to the state. Additionally, we have worked with the Greater Akron Chamber to assist us. They had some technical expertise on the backside that we did not, so we are incurring a fee for that. And because we will be exceeding $750,000 of federal funds flowing through us, we will be going through a single audit next year, which I don't have an exact price on, but what I have been quoted is $15,000 to $20,000. So, this is not something that we obviously do on a regular basis. It's probably, I hope it's something we never have to do again, quite honestly, because we'll never, hopefully, have to go through a pandemic like this again. But that's kind of where we got to where we are. I'm happy to answer any questions. I mean, certainly we have had a really positive working relationship with the city. We love having the partnership that we do with Jessica. So, that's why I'm here tonight, to answer questions and see what else you would like to know and be happy to answer.
Mr. Mark?
Thank you very much for being here. Let's answer our questions. The first question I would have is, do you have I know you have the universal numbers, but do you have the Shelby specific numbers of how many businesses apply?
Jessica. Hi. Yes, I do, sort of. They're preliminary. So basically, at this point, we've had 21 businesses apply that have a Shelby address. At least 2 of them are outside of the city at this point. We're still working through the verification of some of the addresses as well as their qualifications. So there's a few other criteria they have to meet in order to qualify. So at this time, it was 21 less the 2. I know the total number with Shelby addresses was 112,500, so taking those 2 out, I think there was a 75 and a 25, so we're right around 100,000 actually.
And keep in mind the county's money is everywhere. So, so that money certainly can, and I'm sure it will benefit Shelby businesses.
Mr. Gates?
Grant administration is never a simple thing because it's much more complicated than administering the grant, as Mrs. Perry has indicated. The verification, the confirmation, and then ultimately the audit. That in this particular case, those are complicated. And quite honestly, the chamber's life would be much easier if they weren't doing this at all. But nonetheless, they have risen, to the situation and taken this on. So they're to be commended for that. So we have, what we've heard is 21 applications with Shelby addresses, 2 beyond the city limits. So there's 19 businesses then that, preliminarily, anyways, applied. It remains to be seen whether they go through the screening and do qualify. It's hard to measure this, but how would these 19 businesses be, I don't want to say necessarily harmed, but negatively impacted, which is a jargon term if there ever was one, but how would they be disadvantaged if they had to go into the county pool for money?
Well, I can't say that for sure as we're going through the scoring, but the way that we have put the program together is the county's money is going to be distributed first. So that's going to go to the highest scoring businesses. So we have a rubric that we are basically grading the businesses on 8 different data points in their application. So the highest scoring businesses is what the county's money will go to. And then what we're going to do is take each municipality's money that they're putting in and say, so let's say the top, for round numbers, 20, I don't know what it is, I've had a couple of them. Let's say the top 30 businesses get funded by the county. with 267 remain, or 237 remaining at that point, that need to be funded. So then I'll take the city of Shelby's money and say, okay, of the remaining funds, how many of those are city of Shelby businesses? And then we'll fund as many as we can with your dollar. So what I can't tell you is how many the counties will take up right now. So we're working through eligibility this week. But I do think that, certainly the size and the population of the amount of asks that we have, and we have asks from all over the county. So what each municipality is really doing is kind of, I don't know what the word would be, guaranteeing a certain number of businesses are going to get funded in their community beyond the counties, which certainly would be huge. So our data points that we're looking at, just to kind of give you an idea, range from how long has a business been open, how many years of experience does an owner have, what type of business are they in? We all know that some business types are more impacted by COVID. Restaurants we know have been hit very hard. Maybe a professional office, not so much. So we're working off a Brookings study for that. We're looking at how much lost revenue have they had because of COVID. That's something we asked. Are they a disadvantaged business enterprise, minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned, that sort of disadvantaged business enterprise. So it kind of goes into a whole rubric, and that's how the score pops out. We try because, it's a small community, so we all know each other, and certainly we know many of the businesses. So we really have tried to make it as an objective process as possible, take the subjectivity out of it.
Mr. Rob?
Out of these 21 businesses, how many of them have applied for county money?
Well, it's just one application pool.
One application pool.
Yep.
So through the process, they've already been evaluated.
We're doing that this week, actually. So
they will be evaluated.
yes, yep, and they might score to get county money, and certainly we will award that.
So if they don't make the cut at the county level, then the evaluation is already done, right?
Well, it will be done, yes. I mean, they'll be evaluated. If they don't get county money, then right now they wouldn't receive anything else.
So how much additional time and effort is going to be involved in should they apply for the city's money?
It's really on the backside, because what happens, so let's say, for example, we're going to announce the first round, at least, of the money that we have Monday. So what's going to happen is we're going to email business owner A and say, congratulations, you have scored or you're eligible to receive this. We need the following documents from you. So we need to have, some tax documents for underwriting purposes. So on the backside, they're going to sign an agreement with the chamber. We need their W-9. Then we're going to issue them a check. And then they have until November 30th. They have to come back to us, and this is where it's going to take the time. We're going to have to reach back out to them to get the documentation of how they spent it, because that all has to be done according to the federal government. So they need proof that business owner A said, yes, I'm covering my, let's say they said, I'm going to cover my August and September payroll. So I need proof from them in the form of canceled checks or a payroll register that indeed they did spend the money according to what they had. And that's why doing so many more grants adds so much more time. It's, absolutely, getting the program set up was one big chunk of time. But by doubling or whatever it is, in terms of how many grants it is, that's that much more time that we're putting into the program.
Mr. Rob?
So some kind of criteria used, scoring criteria, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
That scoring could carry through when they come back to Shelby and apply? Is that?
They won't have to come back to Shelby to apply.
Well,
basically.
if the money here is applied, does that scoring criteria change?
No, it wouldn't, and your money would only go to City of Shelby businesses. So let's say in this example, maybe $20,000 is picked up by the county, and you had committed the $100,000. If there was money remaining, we would return that to you, or we could talk about, is there another round that we could do to help get that money into the hands of Shelby businesses? So, I mean, our whole goal in the entire thing of doing this is to help the businesses. It's really, it's not for us at all. It's really to help the businesses. So,
Mr. Robbins?
So, if you apply that criteria, there's not too much additional work, right?
well, the work is really double checking all of the material that people need to file for the grant. So, in other words, like if I don't receive extra Shelby money to put into the program, whatever the county's money, however far that goes in the city of Shelby businesses, that's all that gets funded. So those other Shelby businesses will not receive funding, meaning I don't have to do any additional work for them. But if we do get more funds, then I need to, get the money dispersed to them, and then also track that they spend it the way that they're supposed to. And then next year, when the auditors come knocking on the door and say, city, county, whoever, you're essentially hiring us to run this program for you, prove, chamber, that you made sure that those businesses used their money the way that they were supposed to. And that's what we have to make sure that we do. And it's a lot of work.
Mr. Martin?
So you talk about the back-end work. To the best of your knowledge, if we decided just to disperse the funds ourselves as a city, how much of that back-end work would we be required to, under the CARES Act, to fulfill?
You have to do all of it. I mean, you have to, you would have an audit. I mean, you'll have an audit for receiving CARES Act funding, I would assume, and you'll have to show that you did everything in line with the CARES Act. So I don't think it's any less because it's coming to us. It's also not more. It's just outside of what we normally do.
Mr. Martin?
So, I appreciate the clarity on that, because in doing some research between the last council meeting and this council meeting, it did become very evident that there is a lot of back-end work that's required and would be required of us if we decided to do it ourselves. So I am in support of the contract as it is, because I understand that back-end work. I do have one follow-on question though. The only really question I have is on the disadvantaged score. Can you explain the reasoning for the disadvantaged score on placing out funds and why that belongs in the rubric?
Well, we looked at businesses that were likely to be heavily impacted, and we wanted to make sure that we were equitable. I mean, or at least looking at that as it's one number in there. So just because a business is a disadvantaged business enterprise certainly does not mean that they're going to receive money. It's one number, but I mean, there has been studies that has talked about the pandemic is hurting certain types of businesses more, and certainly women-owned businesses is one that I have read several stories about. And so that was really just a way for us to look at it. And we looked at also, Jobs Ohio has a disadvantaged business zip code list. Shelby scores on that list, so that factors into that as well versus, let's say, Belleville does not. I mean, that's not considered a disadvantaged zip code. So, so those things factored in, and that was really, we wanted to, our goal with the money, again, knowing that we were starting at least the conversation with the county, we really wanted to make sure it got through the county. And so there was a little, all those scoring rubrics were looked at in that light.
Right, and so, it goes through the county, and so let's just say, just to put out nice numbers, there's 10 businesses, I know there's 19, but
Sure.
the math on that is way too
10's
difficult.
way easier.
10 businesses, of those 10, it goes through the county, 5 are funded, okay, through the county. Then it would essentially go to our list, and of course, at a $7,500 cap, all 5 would get funded. That additional money, according to the contract, that additional money is then returned to the city. But what if we don't want the money returned to the city? Like, what if we want to make sure that our businesses are especially taken care of if there is excess?
Yeah.
What avenue would we have as a council to address that? Because by contract, it gets returned to us. And you had mentioned in your answer to Councilman Rob that there would be additional conversations. So can you kind of walk through what that would look like? Now, hopefully, that's the best case scenario. We're able to give an extra $500, $1,000 to our businesses because they scored so high on the list. But can you kind of walk through what you feel that process would look like, and how do we go about that with the terms of the contract being what they are?
Sure. So I think that what my suggestion would be, and we're kind of looking at this with everyone, I would say, especially in light of if additional monies come in from the county and that, if let's say in your example, there's $50,000 left. I mean, that's a significant amount. So one thought is we could run a special application round for Shelby businesses that maybe missed the first round of applications. And, I can't say for sure if Shelby did, but I know I got some calls from other municipalities where businesses called a day or two after the deadline. And, because this was all communicated, it's federal dollars, we stuck to the deadline. So that would be one thought if there's a significant amount left. Again, our point of this is to get it into the business's hands versus, I know there's another round being voted on this week, I think, by the Ohio House. The Senate passed it, so there's additional monies coming in. Kind of the conversation that I've had with other municipalities is if you get to a point where, even apart from the money that we're talking about now, that you think you have additional funds that could help businesses, like, call us, we would like to help you. So I think we have a good setup now. Again, we have to run the process, and that certainly would take a little time, but I think we do it much more quickly than say like it took us the 6 weeks to stand the program up the first time. So I'll probably know that within the next probably 2 weeks, I would guess, like where your money is in terms of how much is spent, and then I'll also have a better idea of like, the additional monies that we might get from other municipalities. Like, what's our list shaping up to be, and then what else could be done with it? I will say very, very preliminarily, there is some talks. We didn't initially include nonprofits in this, and that was because I knew I had a very limited pool, and so that was one of the things that we looked at. And there was some mixed guidance from OMB about whether nonprofits could actually use it. Well, just recently, actually, I think last week, they clarified and said, yes, you can, as in not us I'm talking about, but like, let's say a 501c3 applied to our grant program, that's what I'm talking about. They now have clarified that and said, yes, from Ohio's perspective, we'd be okay with that. So very, very preliminarily, please, at this point, until I know more, I will certainly come back and tell you. There is some discussion of like, could we do a special something for nonprofits? Because we certainly know that they're also hurting. So those would be options, I think, that we could look at all of those. There's certainly nonprofits in Shelby that could benefit if we had money left, or there's probably businesses that if we put that out again for a week and said, hey, here's one more week to apply. Anyone who got money the first time, you don't count, but if you missed it and you want to get in, we'll do this and run it through. So, is that kind of?
Are you accepting late applications, or are you just saying no?
We just said no for the time being, but we know who called. Because again, the way it was all communicated through the press and everything, I was afraid to extend it without knowing that it got through the press the same way. So we just kind of held steady on that deadline the first time. Though in the back of our minds, though I certainly didn't promise this to anyone, was, maybe we can do something to assist those businesses. So we did, just so you know. I mean, it was published in, the newspapers, on TV, I was on the radio, we sent emails, it was in our newsletter. So we really did try to get it out. It was on social media. We tried to get it out as far as possible. Maybe you shared it, I appreciate that, so, yeah.
Mr. Gates?
Mayor, this is probably somewhat a sidebar to the actual piece of legislation, but close enough, I think it's relevant. And I appreciate the clerk of council providing us clarification as to who has contracted with whom for economic development. One question that arose 2 weeks ago was that, I don't mean to put words in my colleague's mouth, but it's how I recall the argument, was that the city is contracted with the chamber to provide economic development services, and this should be included automatically. Well, as we were reminded, the city does not have a contract with the Chamber of Commerce. The city has a contract with the CIC, and as I glanced through it, there are 6 items here that the CIC and the city have agreed to. As far as I understand, they have done what that contract requires, and the fact that, Mayor, you signed an agreement renewal with the CIC is ratification of that. The MOU between the CIC and that time it was the Richland Community Development Group, which is merged into the chamber. Again, there's six points there. That would be up to the CIC to decide whether or not the Chamber Development Group has complied with that. So my point is we do not have an existing contract with the Chamber. What is before us tonight would authorize the only contract between us and the Chamber.
Mr. Martin?
I did one other item, and Mr. Gates kind of prompted my memory on it. The contract, not contract, I think it's an agreement document between the chamber and the business. This is just a quibble, but I think a significant one. In that agreement, now obviously it was written for the county at large, but in that agreement it specifically says that the chamber has taken part in this Richland County program. For the funding that's coming from this council to our businesses, I would like to see that verbiage reflecting the fact that this is a Shelby program and not just a Richland County program that we're funding. It's a minor quibble, but I think it's important they understand who's actually, in the great sense, helping facilitate that check.
Sure.
Because if they're getting money from us, it's because they did not make the cut to get money from the county. And so we're stepping into that gap, and I would like to see the city recognized for that. So that's just the only kind of quibble I had with the language in that document.
Fair enough, and we have to track whose money is supporting what business, so that should be an easy thing to be able to communicate to the business, so.
Any further discussion? Not, we're going to take a roll call vote on the passage of ordinance number 23, 2020.
Mr. Robb?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Ordinance number 23, 2020 passes. We'll come back then to our agenda, and we come now, is there no other public comment? Did you, Mr. Guys?
Didn't know if the council would entertain getting Mrs. Webb up to the front. I heard her call.
I mean,
Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that council proceed to consider at this point resolution number 44, 2020.
it's run up by unanimous consent if we would move forward to resolution 44, 2020. Are there any objections? Hearing none, we'll move forward then to resolution number 44, 2020. Mr. Crum.
Resolution number 44, 2020, authorizing the mayor as Director of Public Service to apply for the Ohio History Connection Ohio History Fund grant for the scanning and digitization of city records and declaring an emergency.
Move the resolution be taken up and passed. Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Roberts for the passage of resolution number 44, 2020. Discussion. Mr. Gates.
I found it, I don't want to say I chuckled, but when Mrs. Webb earlier said that the city records are being stored not archivally safe, may have been her phrase, that's an understatement. There's a picture that's included in the application or in our packets, and we can see these ancient documents, and I say ancient not as an exaggeration or hyperbole, indeed they are ancient records, in the bottom of a cabinet upstairs at City Hall, certainly a place that is not, there's no humidity control that I'm aware of up there, or none appreciable, and certainly probably subject to wide variations in heat up there. So I will point out that I had reason to look for it decades ago, and the very first council minute book is missing. And so when she mentioned that the record started, I think it might be 1863.
Yes.
And, you know, the city was incorporated in 1853. So we've got 10 years, 11 years worth of city record, village records that have disappeared. I have no idea what happened to that record book, but I can say that 30 plus years ago when I was looking for it, it was gone.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
The only question I had, just one of actual curiosity, why 1934 and why not further?
Apparently that is as far as the old books go, and I have not seen it myself. Christina would be able to more adequately address that question.
Mr. Geis.
I'm the one that showed Ms. Drain. That was with the old bound books and so forth, and I think that amount of years and it's quite a bit for them to take on and one thing, so I think that's where she wanted to cut it off and see how it goes. Maybe apply again for some other thing.
Well, that was my following question is this something then that we need to look at for 1934? Are they already digitized? Like what? I don't think they are, but I'm pretty confident they aren't. But you know, it's possible they're somewhere digitized. But so this is just, we'll call it the first step in our digitization process. All right. Cool.
Phase one is a very good way, to describe that.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robb?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Resolution number 44, 2020 passes. Yes, it would be a mass exodus.
Sorry.
Let it be noted for the record. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think we're ready now to move on to reports from standing and special committees. for Personnel Committee minutes. Councilman Gates.
Thank you, Mayor. The committee did meet last Tuesday. First item of business, of course, is the financial documents from the Finance Department. My colleagues will pick up their packet. We're going to turn to the back page and take a look at city income tax collections. If we look at the table at the top, the cumulative collection for through August, $2.7 million. That's down 3% compared to 2019. If we look down at the bottom and look at the monthly collections for August of this year, it was $244,000 collected compared to $290,000 the previous year. That, looking at the 5 years of information we have there, the August of 2020 is number 4 in the ranking. The questions that the finance director posed, perhaps that reflects less overtime, perhaps that reflects fewer employees. We don't really know for sure, but again, a drop looking at previous years, and particularly when you look at the previous month of July, of course, which was the adjusted filing deadline, so it may not be any kind of comparison at all, but less than half of what it was the month before. If we'll page forward and find, it's the second page, down at the bottom we can see 220 income tax, and we can see that comparing 2020 to 2019, individual was up 0.6%, businesses up 20%, but withholding down 6.6%. As we pointed out at the previous month, individuals and businesses are paying their income tax based on their 2019 income, whereas withholding is a current snapshot. So, we can look at the first two, particularly business, and say, oh my goodness, up 20%, how wonderful. But again, remembering that that is on last year's income. The fear, of course, is that next year, both the individual taxes and the business taxes are going to be significantly less than what they are this year. We would all hope that's not true, but again, with my experience, is that when there's a downturn in the economy, our Shelby income tax collections get whacked the next year. So, overall, again, we're down 3%, which doesn't sound too much. But again, looking forward, there could be some real problems on the horizon. Now, let's turn right to the front page and take a quick look at the general fund line item there. With 8 months gone, that's 67% of the year. If we look at the income that the general fund has brought in so far as of the end of August, it was 71% of the estimated income. Expenditures have only been 55% of the expected expenditures. So that's a very good comparison. So what that tells us is that department heads and administrators are holding the line to the greatest extent possible. Now, of course, as a service provider, the rough figure is about 80% of your costs are going to be personnel costs. Same except the utilities, where we get into an enterprise. But when we look at the general fund, park, health, etc., they provide a service. So And to provide a service, you have personnel costs. So, again, to the extent that people can, not buy things now, defer them later, of course, that deference may not work, depending how the numbers work next year. But, I don't mean to be Chicken Little here, but we need to have our eyes open as to what can happen. Well, enough of the hanging crate. Let's take a look at the rest of the front sheet. I'm just going to down highlight a few capital improvements. Line 300. We have a cash balance of $209,000, but there is a cruiser that is going to be purchased. We also last meeting approved some monies for work on the CSX, the bridge over the CSX, and the Haskell Memorial Bridge. So, those are expenses that are going to come out of there. Again, looking at the utilities, and we'll look at more of those at the next page. Fire equipment, we have reserve for encumbrance, pushing $19,000 for the Marks radios. There's some possibility that CARES monies could fund those. That remains to be seen. Again, using the 67% of the year gone, we've collected 63% of the revenue across the board with 55% of the expenditures. So that is, again, a good, quick and dirty measure of what's happening overall with the expenditures. Again, looking at the next page, we look at income tax at the bottom. The expenditure, 101 wages, it's up about 2%. Again, that was expected. That's not a surprise. Back up at the top, the total budget, again, we see that revenues do exceed expenditures by $308,000. In the general fund, revenues exceed expenditures by $213,000. So that's good. Going on to the next page where we do the comparisons of the utilities, we can see that both in the 400, the wastewater or the sewer fund, and 500, the water fund, we see that expenditures do exceed revenues. Excuse me, no, that's only true in the water, the wastewater. It's a loss this year of $45,000, but in the water fund, revenues exceed expenditures by $65,000. I pointed out we seem to be doing this dance from year to year as to which is giving us the greater headache. 1 year it seems to be the sewer fund, and 2 years ago, it was the sewer fund, and last year it was the water fund, and now it's switched back to the sewer fund. Kind of like this dance that those two do back and forth. One is fine 1 year, and the other is ailing. So we'll look back down to the 220 fund, and again, that's we'll see the transfers to the various funds. We are down in transfers by $54,000 this year. So that's where's our 3% gone? That's what the 3% translates to. Looking at the cash investment reconciliation statement, we have 3 new line items here. If we look down about a quarter of the way on the left side under investments, we can see the Shelby School District bond and 2 bonds for Licking Heights School District. Those are invested at PNC, and you can see one $65,000, $70,000, and then $50,000. So that is a great change in the city's investments. Up to this point, it's only been in CDs and in savings accounts, but purchasing another subdivision's paper is allowed under state law. So I commend PNC for bringing that to our attention, and our finance director, in his wearing his other hat as city treasurer, has chosen to make those investments. Again, we can see what where the monies are, and also checking accounts as of the end of, and that has I think the wrong date at the top there. That says July 31st. That should be the end of August. But we had in the city treasury $14,733,812.54. Short little report on the sort of Roush fund, and I have talked about the income tax collections on the last page. Another thing that came to our attention under, well, I'll talk a little, no, I'll let, I've got notes on bond refinancing, but I'll let the finance director discuss that during his report. Mayor, you reported a few things under personnel. The Shelby Police Department has a new dispatcher. Her name is Mackenzie Hatcher, and she started last Thursday with us. So congratulations to her. We have a new patrol officer by the name of Joe Archer, who will start the 1st of October. In the fire department, there are 4 applicants for firefighters, and interviews were to be held soon, you had reported, and we will be beginning our contract negotiations with the local lodge of the Fraternal Order of Police. Possibly that began today. Was or I should
I'll give you
Okay.
the days. But that was the news we had then.
Okay, coming up soon. We
Yes,
thought it was going to
yes,
be
sir, that's a
that
good.
day. So
So,
that is, that's a report for finance, or for personnel. The finance director did bring to our attention, and it's somewhat confusing. We thought that we had dealt with the state auditor and the audit for our 2019, for 2019 calendar year. But there is another management letter that has come. There are some certain issues that have been brought to the city's attention. This was certainly a surprise to me, and perhaps even to those at City Hall, thinking that we had dealt with this. But at this point, the information is still in draft form. Only the state auditor can release that. So I'm restricted as to what I can say. But these documents were emailed to my colleagues, so they can take a look at those, and if they have any particular questions, they can direct them to the appropriate officer. There is an opportunity, as always, for the city to make response to these. I fully expect that the city, if the city has not yet done so, will do so very soon, because I'm not sure what time frame the state auditor is on to release this, but we certainly don't want to miss an opportunity to explain the situation from our point of view. So Mayor, that is the report from Finance and Personnel. If any of my colleagues have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them or to pass them off either to the Safety Service Director or to the Finance Director, as the case may be.
are there any comments or questions from Mr. Gates? Mr. Mark?
I just have one follow-on thing. I know that looking at the income tax picture for next year seems rather bleak at this point, not necessarily bleak, concerning, I would concerning at this point. But one thing to appreciate is the fact that we've worked very hard to put us in a sound fiscal position where we're not facing this with a very tight general fund balance. This would be a whole different conversation, and that would be very much more concerning is if we were in that situation, as this council has faced in the past with downturns and not having any wiggle room within the general fund to be able to withstand it. Regardless of where that number ends up, we're projecting 7% down, we're projecting 8% down. Even at a full 8% down, our general fund will be able to withstand a very big want of that without affecting the services of the city. So everyone on this council and past councils is commended because it has helped us be in this situation. So,
Thank you. Mr. Gates.
Mayor, I move that the combined financial statement and the cash investment reconciliation statement, both dated 8/31/2020, be received, placed on file, and posted to the city's website.
Second. We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin that the combined financial statement and the cash investment reconciliation statement, both dated 8/31/2020, be received, placed on file, and posted to the city website. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robb?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Very good, that motion passes. Thank you, Councilman Gates. Move forward to Utilities and Streets Committee, Councilman Martin.
Mayor, thank you. There are many times where I get before this council to give my report, and I lie to you and say it's going to be a short report, and it ends up being a long report. I can't even lie to you about this one. This was going to be a doozy. Mainly because we got a feasibility report back, and we wanted to discuss that. Give it the respect it deserves. So please bear with me. I'll try to get through this as fast as I possibly can without skipping important information. The first one is we are undergoing an electric line loss study. Every quarter, our cost per kilowatt for electric is calculated by using a fuel and purchase power adjuster. We're all aware of that. That calculator divides the most recent 12 months of fuel purchase power cost by the previous 12 months of the kilowatt hours delivered. In addition, the behind meter generation fuel consumption and kilowatt hours produced are added into basically a fuel and purchase power calculator for the prior quarter. The result is then multiplied by a factor of 0.94. That 0.94 reflects a 6% static loss power. Now, we're questioning whether the amount of energy lost within our system is actually at that 6%, or it could be less. If the average power loss in the distribution system is 3 to 5%, we are hoping that the results from the study will present power loss less than the current adjustment percentage of 6%. If the power loss is determined to be less, the cost per kilowatt will reflect that reduction according to the designated power loss. To put in perspective, you guys all saw this in the PowerPoint, but at the 6% line loss, the 12-month cost would be 0.0879 cents. 8.79 cents. The decimal was in the wrong place there. And then, but that would go down to basically 8.61 if it was, for example, a 4% line loss. The big takeaway from this, obviously, we'll get the information on after the study, and that calculator would need to be adjusted via legislation if it comes down there. But the big takeaway from this, Mayor, is that we are trying to uncover every single bit of savings we can for our customers when it comes to power. And this means revisiting such things as, whether it's 4% or 6% on line loss. And so we're doing everything we can to minimize the effect on our consumers and our customers. So that's a big takeaway there, and more will come when those results are presented to the committee upon completion of the study. Water treatment plant. The Water Treatment Plant Construction Fund. To give a little surcharge history here, Ordinance 15/2000 amended the water ordinance to establish language to include the Water Treatment Plant Construction Fund to collect revenue stream for improvements of the water treatment plant. And surcharges were designed as follows: for residential, $5.50, commercial, $6.50, elderly or totally disabled, $3.50, meters over 1 inch, $7. Those monies collected for the Res 2 rehabilitation had sunset of 4 years or less. The monies collected for the Water Treatment Plant Construction Fund is sunset 20 years or less. Ordinance 42/2000 amended the water ordinance again to remove the Res 2 rehabilitation. But the surcharges remain the same, with the sunset remaining at that 20 years. Ordinance 36/2004 amended the water ordinance again due to a state mandate to make specified improvements to the treatment plant. plant upgrade was implemented to meet the EPA mandate. At this time, the language removed the sunset duration statement for the 20 years and established language that would collect the surcharge until a time when the improvements have been implemented and completed. Now, in accordance with Ordinance 36/2004 language, the surcharge for the water treatment plant construction fund can be removed from collection upon completion of the project. Mr. Insman will be preparing more detailed financial information on the fund balance and collections next month to help determine when those collections for the water treatment construction fund can be removed. With the water treatment plant construction note to be paid off soon, how do we maintain the assets of the water treatment plant and reservoirs? This is the question that will be before us. The short answer comes from the EPA mandate. The mandate requires a public water system to implement and show revenue stream to maintain their assets. Without, the long and short of it is, without us getting a construction fund credit, we no longer have revenue to maintain the system. So we will have to fix that. So those recommendations will be coming next month. Let's get ahead on that. All right. Legislation is coming for us to authorize the mayor to prepare and submit application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement Program. The application to the OPWC will present the city's portion of the Shelby Streetscape project cost for consideration. If awarded the financial assistance through the program, the city could receive a grant up to $155,000, which would mean that our out-of-pocket cost for the downtown streetscape project would be $0. So that's pretty awesome. Look forward to that. All right, the broadband feasibility study presentation. The broadband feasibility study has been completed by our consultants from Vantage Point Solutions. The consultants will be forming the committee of the finding that we did, and the representatives who gave us the presentation were Christy, I believe it's Zabo, who had that wrong, but Director of Consulting, and then Shelby Party, who is the analyst, and sent out all of the different things that we had. So that was given to our committee over Microsoft Teams, and that PowerPoint, along with the feasibility study itself, was given to every member of council. The feasibility study, if you go into your email, it comes in two parts. One is the full kit and caboodle, which is, I think, 150 pages. And then there are basically the different forecasts, which are much smaller, 13 pages, I think, 12, 13 pages. The original forecast we were given, and the one that was in the PowerPoint presentation to us, was a forecast of a 5-year build. The committee asked that they produce different build scenarios for a shorter period of time, because we felt that a 5-year build was just not going to be feasible, not feasible in the financial sense, our documents say otherwise, but feasible in, we'll call it the political sense. In other words, where do we start in the city? How do we break that up over 5 years' time? Okay, you get a lot of, we'll call it momentum and excitement about the fact that it's coming to the city, and then all of a sudden you tell someone, yeah, it's coming to your neighborhood in 5 years. Right? There are a lot of businesses who are entering multi-year contracts as we speak. The school district that we're going to be able to provide. A lot of other people are making business decisions based on, they can't wait around for 5 years. So we asked for a couple different things, and that was presented to you in email, I believe it was today. It was a 1-year build and a 2-year build. I'm going to reference, for our sake, when we get into the numbers, I'm going to reference the 1-year build, but understand there are different options, and it's not to say that we're going to go with the 1-year build. I just wanted to give that detail. All right, let's dig into this. I'm not going to go into line by line. I'm just going to go into kind of the broad strokes, and of course, deliver what the study says, and then also the recommendations for our next steps on council, where I see this, what are our next steps, where are we going? All right, so on the agenda, they wanted to provide us the identification of the broadband issues in Shelby currently. How do we solve that problem, plan for the future? And then also to present us a financial feasibility study. See if it actually is feasible for us to solve the problem with our plan for the future. And then there are recommendations for next steps, and then they answer our questions, which will be largely on me to answer from you all. So, congratulations to me on that. All right, so what is the problem that we need to solve? In essence, the big problem that we need to solve in 21st century Shelby, Ohio, this is based on the survey and outreach data. Current providers of internet are not meeting the needs and or expectations of our residents. Residents are paying a lot for their broadband and are generally not satisfied with the value they are getting for the cost of their current internet service. The service availability and reliability is very much so not equal around the city. So depending on what neighborhood you're in, where your business is located, where your house is located, depends on the reliability, the cost effectiveness, etc., and also the amount of different service providers who will actually even provide you with internet service. So it's a huge disparity. In summary, the biggest issue facing Shelby is inconsistent availability to reliable, stable, and fast service. Very high cost service while receiving low value. Very few of our residents are actually taking advantage of high-speed internet services. Now, there are different definitions of high-speed internet services, but the current definition of broadband high-speed internet service is at least 25 megabits per second download and 5 megabits per second upload. That's the current 25 and 5. That's the current standard. Most services and most people that we would have are well below that, or paying for that, receiving low. So that's kind of the big issue there. All right. So we're talking about fiber at a high level for the full build. We went through an initial meeting with Vantage Point, and they presented us with a budget for what this costs. The bottom line is that fiber is expensive, getting cheaper, but also a long-term solution, right? So put it this way, there's not going to be, unless we are able to find something faster than the speed of light, which would be wonderful, there's not going to be something that's going to come along that's going to produce a better array of speed and services through that pipe, right? Fiber is the way to go. It's not going to be a legacy technology in a year. If you guys will remember, our initial conversations were the possibility of going with a wireless solution. The issue was, though, wireless technology, when it comes to point-to-point internet service, there's a lot of legacy technology. In other words, you could build a system, pay a whole bunch of money to build out the system today. By the time it's actually built, it will be legacy technology. There will be new and better technology services at higher speeds. There's also a cap on what you're able to produce point-to-point speed to the customer, which provides whole other issues, not to mention stack on top of the fact that we happen to be a tree city, so that means we have a lot of trees, which is really good for aesthetics and also clean air that we breathe. Very bad for wireless technology going point to point, right? So it created a whole bunch of issues that made that solution just completely non-feasible, even though it would have been cheaper to initially roll out. So they came to us and they said, okay, we're going to give the estimates. The estimates that they initially gave us was $15.9 million for the complete build-out, everything nuts and bolts, including all the devices in the individual homes and such. But they were going off the assumption that most of our build-out would be conduit, which it won't be for us because we own our own poles, and we're able to hang a majority of our fiber on poles. That reduces the cost significantly. So we went from 15.9 million to, as you see here in your PowerPoint presentation and also in the feasibility studies, 8.9 million for the complete build out. Now that does include the drops. It does include also the the FTTP electronics, which is the, for lack of a better term, the device that goes in your home that allows your internet to go to your home, right? So if you have internet in your house, you're familiar with this, what we would call the modem, right? And so it's what takes the internet from the fiber to the modem to your other devices in your home. The particular one they're recommending for us has built-in wireless as well. So our customers would not have to go and purchase their own Wi-Fi setup. It would be within the box itself. That's also better for maintenance as well, because we'd be able to, our maintenance team would be able to go into the box and say, okay, here's the issue, which resets your box, or it's on the user end, it's your Apple TV, it's your actual computer, it's not the box itself. Provides a lot better customer service that way. I say all that to say, that total cost is 1.4 million just in itself. That cost can be given to the customer as a device fee, or you get it with everything else, device rental fee or etc. Some of these, as far as the drops, whether there's an initial connection fee, which is also supported in the study, that also can be, for lack of a better term, we'll call clawed back. So that's all figures into the estimate. All right, the capital expenditure assumption, that assumes that there is an existing point of reference, a POP within the city of Shelby. There is. Assumes that the POP is along a proposed mainline fiber route. There is. Estimate assumes placement of prefabricated hut near the intersection of Wilson Avenue and Mansfield Avenue, light plan. Subscriber counts of proposed fiber routes determined via aerial imagery. Estimates include engineering and overhead broken out separately. And they did provide the mileage. So our aerial mileage, our town aerial mileage is 53.7 miles. The town main line, in other words, the amount of miles that will actually have to be buried is 2.7 within the town, 1.2 rural, and the rural main line is 0.6 miles. And that's the Shelby area for that. All right. Estimates include engineering overhead broken out separately. Electronics cost assumption is that we're going to use a GPON unit, which I can go into what that means, but that's basically the unit, what modem we're using. OSP construction costs assume both aerial and buried mainline construction, and talk about that, and OSP costs based on recent contract prices from various projects. So they actually do a lot of contract deals, so they're able to give us, basically they were able to give us up to almost day what it would actually cost us for this fiber, so very reliable assumption on that. All right, so we know the problem, and we know how we can solve it. The question is that financially feasible for us to do it? In other words, if we were looking at this as a business, would this business, A, make money, and B, make enough money to sustain itself, maintenance-wise, and everything? They completed 2 different financial feasibility studies, and now technically 3. First was a 10-year full city of Shelby area at the total area build cost of $8.9 million. And then they did a second one with a 10-year beta area at a build cost of $623,000. The reason we had them do this is because there had been talk about us breaking this up into phases. What if we just did a beta area? And they did that for a few years to build up money, and then we built out the rest of the city. What we found, and the assumptions of 50% penetration rates for services on both, they feel that that's a low estimate. And then assumed project is 80% financed to fund the capital expenditures. So they factor that into the interest payments. All right, for the full area, more of what they were talking about too. They talked about us offering as a city 6 different offerings. The first offering being 25 megabits up and down. And so, remember what I said, it can be a 25 download, 5 upload. That is called an asymmetrical service, where your upload speeds are actually different than your download speeds. Very common, very commonplace. What we're actually going to be offering though as a city is asymmetrical, meaning that the upload speeds and the download speeds are going to be the same. In other words, those sides of the pipe are going to be the same for our customers. So they'll be experiencing the exact same speeds without different lag. There are a lot of benefits to that, especially for business communities, for those interested in growth in the tech sector. I can talk about those separately if we want. But that's the offering that we are assuming and we will be offering. So those 6 offerings are going to be 25, 100, 250, 500, and then 1 gigabit, meaning that we will be a gig city. We actually, for businesses, will be actually able to offer a 10 gig offering as well. But that is neither here nor there. Managed Wi-Fi, I talked about that, being able to do the managed Wi-Fi at the unit inside the house. The cumulative earnings, in other words, how much is actually earned over that 10-year period, would be $542,463. The ROI comes in at a 0.61%, and the EBITDA averages $824,000 over years 3 through 10. That is a 20-year debt amortization with a 2.5% interest rate in year 1, with an increase of 0.25 each following year. And again, this was based off of a 5-year build. So the 1-year build would just be that 2.5% interest rate. Because interest rates are lower now, we can't guarantee the interest rate will be lower in the future. The financial feasibility review for the beta area. So just a defined area that we defined for just beta service. Same 6 offerings. The cumulative earnings over 10 years for that limited area was negative $2.3 million over 10 years. Our ROI would be negative 37.32%, and the EBITDA remains negative over all 10 years. So it became very evident, obviously, it doesn't make sense to do small. We're either going to go all or nothing. We're going to decide to do this, we're going to decide not to do this. And again, that was a 20-year debt amortization, and the interest rate was the same as applied. All right. Recommendation. The recommendation was last mile networks, which is what we've been talking about, actually going last mile to the home directly, provide the most benefit to our community. The city of Shelby can utilize the existing utility pole infrastructure to deploy the network, resulting in reduced cost to build. We talked about that, savings of around $6 million. Existing operating and billing systems can serve customers, and the survey results in stakeholder findings show a need for dependable broadband, provider. So we talked about the biggest issues, was inconsistent availability to a reliable, stable, fast internet connection, very high cost service while receiving low value, and the current providers are not meeting the overall needs or expectations of many residents and businesses. But they feel that the plan, we will be able to do that. So that is the PowerPoint that they gave us. You guys all received the 1-year build, and I'm going to go to, for the 1-year build, I'm going to go to the specific EBITDA year over year. So obviously, the earnings, EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and there's an A in there, but anyways, thank you. I almost had it, almost had it. But anyways, so obviously year one is gonna be a deficit in that, because we're doing a build out and we're starting to ramp up. That EBITDA is at negative 511,000 for year one. Year two though, we start seeing a positive EBITDA if we do a 1 year build, as opposed to a positive EBITDA in years 3 through 10 with a multi-year build. So we start seeing a positive EBITDA in year two of 168,000. Then goes to 582,000 year three. Year four, it peaks at 914,000, and then it starts dropping slowly, 892, 870, 870, 846, 821, 796. Reason for that is increased, best I can tell, increased depreciation, and also, what do we get? There was one other thing I had highlighted and I forgot to. Adjusting, I'm sorry?
The interest drops.
Yeah, the interest drops, the cost of services goes up, and also the cost of maintenance goes up as your system gets older, maintenance goes up. So that accounts for that, but we're still going to be in that positive EBITDA. Again, that's with the 50% penetration. Did ask, we haven't gotten it yet, did ask for what is that bottom line number of customer penetration we need. Because again, while we're kind of thinking this in business terms, we have to remember it is going to be a public utility. So our goal isn't to make millions upon millions of dollars. Our goal is to make it as effective, efficient for our customers, and then putting what's left over into the system, but also being able to provide for the other public utilities in town. So that's kind of the overall goal. But the numbers say that it is financially feasible to do so. All right. So before I get into the next steps, I guess, are there any questions that you would have for me at this time? I know there's a lot of questions we probably have, and I'll get into what we're going to be doing next steps and try to sway all that. But are there any questions at this point? The plan for the build out would be, again, the 1 year build would basically be we're going to be setting a date. This is the date when you'll be able to have the lights turned on, so to speak, and the whole city will be available.
Who does the build? Who hangs all the fiber, who goes to the houses, puts the lines in?
It would be a contractor that would do it. We could actually facilitate a lot of that. We can't do the splicing in-house. Well, can't do the splicing in-house yet. According to the plans, though, there are additional full-time employees associated with all these numbers. So that's not just the cost of the build and everything, it actually includes full-time employees. Their assumption was, I want to say it was 6. It might have been 7. 6 and I think it was 6.5. 6 and a partial of full-time employees that be brought in to actually do that, and that their salaries and everything was factored in. Because obviously you need customer service technicians, you're probably going to need additional billing staff, whatever. Some of that we already had incorporated with our utilities office. So some of those shared services could be, but they factored in as if it were a separate entity, right? So, for example, they said there has to be a supervisor of these people. Well, the supervisor very well could be incorporated with our other public utilities. Some of the office staff obviously could be doing, they could process an internet bill as much as they could process a utility. You know what I'm saying? So some of that, I think I think we could actually do better than that, but it was a good staffing level. I thought they had it well thought through.
Do they figure in equipment too, like trucks or so forth? Is that in this? I think we real closely, or?
Yes, they did. They did factor in a couple of, I think, one vehicle. They have a specific term for it, and I don't have it accessible, but they did factor in a vehicle that's basically a splicing vehicle. in essence. Yeah, specific to that.
Excuse me, Mayor, I see that on page 12.
Oh, yeah.
At the top.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. I was very pleased with the thoroughness that they did. I was also pleased at my back of the napkin Excel sheet that I used at the very beginning 5 years ago to kind of see if we could possibly go down this route. Was pretty good. That was pretty close.
Mr. Gates.
Mayor, I move council recess for 10 minutes.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin that council recesses for 10 minutes. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Rob?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Council recesses by the red clock, 8:30. Red digital clock.
Here he is.
Up 4-0, and they got 9-4-4, now we're up 6-4. Who did play?
Skyler. Yeah, I think they're done being on the road.
That's quite a presentation, David.
Yeah, that's a long.
I don't think mine will be that long.
Let me keep mine a couple. We're an hour and a half in, I'm
That's
still
the good thing about being a lawyer, everything's confidential, so you can't make a report.
That's very true. I'm 2/3 the way down the first page, so.
Hey, you're pretty good.
Chief, how are you tonight?
A little bit.
Fantastic.
All around.
Grandmother bought
So she did go.
quite a donation for the pantry last week.
Who did?
Your grandmother.
My grandmother.
That's what my wife said.
Like 6 days. I said, but if you're.
I only have one living grandmother. She's in Ohio.
Oh,
I don't know that it was my grandmother.
Oh.
I mean, maybe she did, but she didn't stop and say hi to me.
Oh, I don't,
I don't know who that would have been. I'll have to ask her when I see her.
Harvest time, always, that stuff always in the air, I find we do anyway.
I'll say something to Patty.
Yeah, I don't think it was my grandmother.
Okay.
I don't think my grandmother's not doing very well. She's 93 or 4.
Back in the day, I used to.
She recently fell and she's not really,
Little white pills.
won't eat. She lives with my parents.
Mhm.
She's, I think, at a
She has.
point where she may not fully recover, I don't know.
But they just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Low rate.
But good, at least you got a donation even if it
Yeah.
wasn't from my
Yeah.
grandmother.
I see. You sure it was the current police chief?
Yeah, I don't know, I was trying to think who.
I was shocked that I was
I do not know,
I didn't even know.
but that's good nonetheless. I'll take it.
Successful food drive out at Cornell's on Saturday.
I know.
I spent most of my day unloading blue grocery bags. I mean, you know, it seemed like there's this blue tint to everything after looking at all those blue bags. So, yeah. The good thing about that is, you know, people are going in and buying off the shelf, unlike the postal drive where people clean out their pantries.
Yeah, some.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
stuff
yeah,
you get a little
right.
dicey.
I'm feeling rather poor.
Yeah.
You never feel good, yeah.
My youngest is sniffling, head cold.
Yeah, I think so too. And just coincidentally, and I guess it's possible, she asked Steve, you know, my son's a physician's assistant, I was born. So we were doing a little telehealth on the Zoom last night, and just, you know, open her mouth and everything, so we're like 2 old people, we said, well, what do you think this is?
Yeah.
He's like, really? But, we went down, when was it? I think it was last Friday. Thursday, Friday, went down to Columbus to pick up some candle cones for maneuverability. Go see it. Some lady came up with the idea, said, let's just set them up at YMCA in their parking lot. This thing you don't ever have it. We're driving. She was elderly lady, had to go Mansfield or Lexington or something. She said, oh, they're far away. I said, okay. But anyways, I went, none of our guys were going to pick anything up, so I picked up 5 cones. But those things have those black.
I noticed with some amusement, the police brought in the paper about the person who chose to redecorate the jail.
Oh, we were so telephone call.
Went in and found stuff all over.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, that's
we
not,
picked them up.
it's not horribly out.
And then we got
That's not
we
what
left the windows
our
down and so forth.
prisoner count's been very low.
Oh,
Those that we have had
Whether
have
that
been
kicked something
just
up,
quite
she had
entertaining.
some sort of a, Steve said, well, it's possible.
Or the run-of-the-mill.
Well, I think we've tried alternative means for just about everybody, and these are those that just, they have to be where they are.
8:38, 8:38, 2
And they're the
minutes.
most incorrigible, so.
So I hope I didn't do this, my little squeaky. I still think it's the way it's hanging.
And I sent you an email back. I did get that other email that you sent out on the 14th.
No.
The chicken one.
Oh.
And I overlooked it because I've had to work on oversized loans. Our municipal ordinances require that I issue permits for oversized loads. That's a little troublesome since I know nothing about oversized loads. So I've relied on the county engineer's office to kind of help us with that process. And so
we got it taken care of, I think, but I overlooked it because I spent 2 days writing a policy that we never got into. So, and I ended up consulting with Joe and.
Is this weight or size or both?
Both, it's for the middle school. Well, the new, whatever, the new campus thing.
All right.
Say again?
K through 8.
20 seconds, gentlemen.
Whatever,
20 seconds there.
whatever.
All I know is they're gonna put in a stupid parking lot.
New Year's Eve party.
Whatever more than, there's a lot more than
Just
that.
as dumb as the high school.
Alrighty, it's 8:40, and council is back in session. I believe, Mr. Martin, you were kind of wrapping up with your report.
I was. And the bottom line is, I was very pleased with the numbers and what came back. I do want to go into what the rates would be for the different offerings, just so we kind of have a mindset of that. For the 25, again, these are asymmetrical, so for the 25, it would be $45.99. For the 100, it would be $59.99. For the 250, it would be $79.99. It would be $94.99 for the 500. Again, these are the numbers they used. Obviously, those would have to be set by council. And it would be $109.99 for the 1 gig offering. And the managed Wi-Fi being offered at a rate of $9.95 per month in addition to that, which would be for the box. Those are very competitive rates, especially at the higher end. To the point, I think that we can actually look at those a little bit, and they're very, very competitive. And the 1 gig and 500 isn't even offered in our area by anybody. The bottom line is that when you look at the gig economy, look at the internet-based services, everything that you do in life is now based on an app or an online platform. And those take tremendous tolls on the Wi-Fi that you use and the internet that you use within your residence. If you have more than 3 devices streaming at any given time, taking the fact that most people are cord cutting, they're getting rid of cable. My grandpa called me the other day and said he was cord cutting. Wanted to know what company I used for my stuff because he didn't want to do cable anymore. So it's becoming very widespread, and as a result, it's taking up more bandwidth. And as a result of that, the companies that offer the services, they only have to provide you that speed that they promise you for about an hour time period within a 24-hour day, which tends to be between 3 and 4 a.m. So at 3 to 4 a.m. you can get on, you're guaranteed to get the service that you signed up for or paid for. We'll be able to do much better. Having an asymmetrical service, and with the loads that we're doing, we're going to guarantee that they'll be able to get those services what they're paying for about around the clock. There might be some peak times where they're off by just a smidge. So instead of 25, they're getting 24, 23. But for most of the time, we'll be able to provide really great customer service to our customers, especially for businesses. Lag time, such like that. It's just an important thing to have in this economy. I would like to also take a moment to kind of rewind 6 months. Imagine we have this already set up, and we're going into the pandemic, and all of a sudden, everyone's children are now at home doing virtual school. We would be able to, as a city, as city council, say, if you have a child who's going through this, your internet, we can give you 5 megabits per second or whatever, free, because your child's there if they need it. Think what that does to the education of those who are in underserved homes. We would be able to work out a deal with the school to where they could actually access school servers and stuff like that direct, without having to go up into the cloud and down with another internet service, but direct on the fiber line straight to the school servers. there's stuff on the school services that the child needs to access for free. And we could do that anyway, however we want to set it up. We know that when it comes to a child's education, their access to broadband internet is directly reflected in their positive test scores. Having access to the information around them is a net positive for the educational experience. We know that. So being able to provide that for everybody within our city, regardless of their socioeconomic status, is something to behold. The internet, while how we access broadband is through a bunch of companies and all that kind of stuff, at the core, being able to have access to the information is a public good, just as much a public good as having a highway come through. So that's kind of my spiel on it. I know I've opined on that enough. Next steps, Mr. Insman and I will be working, getting together with the finance director to basically come up with a finance plan. How could we possibly make this feasible? Is that feasible for us as a city? That's the next steps, really, before we come together as council and vote yay or nay on this. Obviously, before that, I would love to have your input. Questions you have, feel free to email either Mr. Insman or myself. How would this work? What are we doing here? But I think the feasibility study shows that it is financially feasible for us as a city. And frankly, with all the benefits it brings, both in economic development, education, and frankly for the benefit of our citizens, we're quickly getting to the point that we can no longer afford not to provide this service as a part of the different public utility. Mayor, that's
And not to, if I may just piggyback a little bit, when we went to Bryan, and I don't know if Councilman Gates, if you had, I don't know if I'd ever heard the term telecommuting before, maybe you had, but this telecommuting is, you know, I have someone who lives very close to me that has not gone on a job now since March, and is an ODOT highway engineer. He's working from home, and you just wonder how many folks that you would have. It could be, again, the economic development of someone who moves into a city where they can work from home like that, and they choose to live in a city such as one that would have broadband, municipally owned broadband.
Yeah, I work for a company now out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. That's where they're headquartered at. And I've stepped foot in the building twice. But I telecomute, and I work from home. And so the internet and the speeds that I need, you know, which has gotten a little trying with, you know, kids being on, you know, as kids get older, they got more devices, and I'm like,
So you work from 3 to 4?
basically. Get those good quality speeds.
All right, very good. Any other, Mr. Gates?
Just an observation, and, you know, I take these numbers at face value, I have no reason to challenge them. The thing that we have to keep in mind, and I don't know how we do that, but the current service providers that are not going to roll over and let us take business away from them. They will go on the offensive, and we need to be aware that they will do that. And I don't fault them for doing that. I mean, they want to stay in business. They don't want to lose their customers. But again, you know, who knows how deep they will cut their prices in order to keep their customers. Of course, that happens all the time. I know that we keep getting, and I'm not here to beat them up, but you know, Spectrum is who we have our service with, and you know, we get these promotions all the time. You know, it's just like credit card companies. You know, 0% interest. Okay, well that's good for the first, you know, 6, 8, 12 months, and then you zip back up to 23% interest. So we just need to be, you know, forewarned is forearmed. I hate to govern by cliche. I seem to do that more often anymore, but that's exactly what's going to happen. We need to know that And the reality, of course, is because everything we do is subject to public records. When they want to know what's going on, all they have to do is send Mr. Crum, a request. Now, I know these lovely reports say proprietary and confidential at the bottom. That means squat. So, when they come to us and want anything that's on paper, we have to provide it. We can't do, we can't do that likewise toward them. But, just be aware, they're gonna be coming at us, and they're gonna be coming at us hard.
Mr. Martin?
Yeah, that is one thing they talked about, is the teaser rates and how you deal with that and all that kind of stuff. The two things that they kind of recommended and that we're fleshing out, obviously, it's not really in these documents per se, but they have mentioned it, is many cities who set this up will set their residents up with what they call a rate for life. And so you get the rate that's never going up as long as you have our service. So you sign on the $49.99 for 25 meg, you will get 25 megabytes every month. $49.99 is what you'll pay every month. That won't go up. The cities that they've seen do that have gotten really great response on that, obviously, but also the price of data doesn't go up dramatically to the point that, and it hasn't gone up with inflation to a point where it would put us in a negative, precarious position. So we're exploring stuff like that, but those are things to be cognizant of. And when they went through the study of there's a form that every internet company is supposed to fill out with what their price is for their different rates. Now, my understanding is those aren't audited or to any degree held accountable. But they were able to go in and they actually did research on that to make sure that we were well lower at a higher quality. But that is something to keep in mind. The other thing that we haven't explored either, which is again a potential add-on, is VoIP, so phone systems. Although most people don't have a home phone anymore, don't need it. Even security systems now are going largely cellular based. The other piece of that too, obviously we're not going with cable. That was something that was decidedly against. However, we could be a refer to cord cutting companies. So whether it be YouTube TV or Hulu, we can actually do an agreement with them that our customers would get basically a lower rate, teaser rate with YouTube TV, for example, and we would get a couple dollars per month back to us as long as they're using it. So there's some other ways that we can use the system as well beyond just the customers. We can also lease our fiber as well. So for example, if there's a company in town that needs to have fiber directly to AWS for their web-based company, we can actually lease parts of our fiber that aren't lit as additional revenue sources and revenue streams as well. So this just goes with the basics, but I do want to mention there are a lot large potential for other revenue streams above that I'm talking about.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments or questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Martin, for that report. Move on to reports from city officials. And very brief, COVID-19 update. We have documented 58 cumulative cases since March. 57 have attained recovered status. We have 1 active case in Shelby, 0 hospitalizations, 0 deaths. This Friday at 10 a.m. will be the dedication of Charles Follis Way, and renaming a portion of Black Fork Street, just north of Skiles Field. The dedication ceremony will take place in the cul-de-sac there in the proximity of the amphitheater. slate of speakers includes Representative Romanchuk, Commissioner John, Ms. Bridget Coles from We Act, Janice Warner from Community Action Commission, playwright Jim Stoner, and cast members in character. So they would be making comments in character on that day. Representatives of Wayne County, where Mr. Fallis grew up, and then members from the Fallis family. So it should be just a really red letter day for us there this coming Friday at 10 a.m. Invite you all to be a part of that. As Mr. Gates mentioned, the labor negotiations with the FOP will begin actually on October the 8th. That's slated for October the 8th. So we'll get things going there. And so that's my report. Any questions or comments for me? If not, move forward then to Mr. Crum, Director of Finance.
Thank you. I'll also keep my report fairly brief and concise. One comment to follow up on Mr. Gates' report with the audit reports, that management letter draft. The auditor contact sent it on Wednesday, then took Thursday and Friday vacation. So I hope to get back with him tomorrow. I think we've already addressed some of those in previous years. So hopefully those will get changed before we get a final copy of that. The bond refunding process, our portion of the work is the majority of the way over. We had our bond rating presentation on Friday. The mayor, myself, and Ms. Cutlip and Ms. Gribben took part in that presentation. I do want to thank all of those people for your hard work in the preparation for that meeting and for the actual presentation that they gave. So from this point, the process will move fairly quickly. We will get our bond rating later this week, and then in the next few weeks they will list the bonds and sell them. I want to say maybe October 13th or so. They're hoping to do the sales and close with everything by the end of October. The projected savings as of a few days ago was probably about $650,000. They don't expect that to change a whole lot because interest rates have kind of, they're ticking up a little bit, but not greatly. So I will keep all of you apprised of that process. That really is my report.
This may add that does not really anticipate an upgrade of our rating. It's just in this environment, that's very little of that is happening. But that looks very strong. We'll at least maintain our A rating. So that's sort of the expectation level. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Crum in his report? Now we'll move forward then to Mr. Gordon Ister, Law Director.
No report.
Thank you. Look forward to Mr. Geis, Project Coordinator.
Thank you, Mayor. Just you can see, everyone see the paving project is complete with the exception of the striping, which will be done tomorrow. They laid that out today, so everything has been adjusted and so forth. Looking pretty good. I also sent out an email, just another reminder, Ashland Rail is working on the Gamble Street crossing. Actually, it's outside the city, so I guess you're gonna call it State Route 61, and then next Monday, they will be on the East Main Street crossing. And as one of my roles is liaison for the Historic Preservation Commission, you'll find in your packets, at their meeting on Friday, are forwarding to council nominations for the bandstand in downtown Park and the mausoleum at Oakland Cemetery to be individual landmarks for historic for the city of Shelby. I've included the procedure on your desk when you got here and so forth. So it does say at the next regular meeting, city council, subsequent to the receipt and recommendation of the commission to designate an individual landmark, council shall vote by motion on the designation of the property. So, any questions on those?
Mr. Gates?
Mayor, I move that council designate the bandstand in Central Park and the mausoleum at Oakland Cemetery as locally designated historic landmarks in accordance with Codified Ordinance 1488.07 B3.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and the second by Mr. Martin. I will try to capture the essence of it, to designate the bandstand in Central Park and the mausoleum at Oakland Cemetery as historic landmarks in accordance,
Locally designated historic landmarks.
locally designated historic landmarks. Thank you. In accordance with ordinance number 1488.07 B3. Okay. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rob?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
That motion of designation passes. Anyone have any comments or questions from Mr. Geis in regard to his report? Hearing none, we'll move forward to new business. Any new business to be brought before council this evening? Hearing none, we'll move forward to old business, unfinished business rather. Future use of the Main Street Fire Station, we have heard nothing at this point. So we will continue to wait for the completion of the transaction there. Under exterior maintenance, 59 West Main Street, I've been advised that there is a contract which is currently under review. So that's where we're at this point. Looks like we very well might have that property being purchased. So exterior property maintenance will, at that point, probably move off the agenda. I think we'll all be happy to see that. Okay. Any other unfinished business? If not, we move forward then to legislation. Mr. Crawford.
Ordinance number 19, 2020, amending chapter 1466, flood damage prevention, section 1466.24, use and development standards for flood hazard reduction, residential structures, of the codified ordinances of the city of Shelby, Ohio.
Move on third reading.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. McLaughlin for the third reading for ordinance number 19, 2020. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rob?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Ordinance number 19, 2020 passes third reading.
Move for passage of the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. Gates for the passage of ordinance number 19, 2020. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rob?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Ordinance number 19, 2020 passes.
Ordinance number 23, 2020, authorizing the...
Point of order 24.
I'm sorry, thank you. Ordinance number 24, 2020, amending ordinance number 8, 2020, annual appropriations and declaring an emergency.
Move the rule requiring that an ordinance be read on 3 separate occasions be suspended.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. McLaughlin that the rule requiring that an ordinance be read on 3 separate occasions be suspended. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rob?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
The motion to suspend passes.
Move the ordinance be taken past. Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. McLaughlin for the passage of ordinance number 24, 2020. Discussion? Mr. Gates.
Mayor, it's it will become more and more common, I think, as we approach the end of the year, that we have these supplemental appropriations ordinances. This one, of course, you can see a big $1.4 million, and we're going to deal with that later on with Resolution 43, 2020, having to deal with the Main Street improvement. And so these are getting those ducks in line, so to speak. There may be others that the finance director can tell that are also included here.
Mr. Crum.
Yeah, there's obviously the 1.4 million is the total costs for the streetscape project, which we were going to put on next year's appropriations, but due to this grant that we're working on now, we need to get everything on the books this year. That is all funds that will be got from external sources, and I have confirmed with all of these things with the county to get them added on the revenue side. The other items, the construction costs for 354 fund, we have some roof work to do in the Justice Center. We're hoping that we'll be able to come back on the builder to recoup those costs. The 402 sewer fund, that 80,000 construction costs, that has to do with getting funds around to potentially assist with the laterals, if you guys choose to do that. And then the 600 distribution capital projects funds for system upgrades of 20,000. That's just a few extra costs in maintaining the system that I was short when I did appropriations.
Thank you. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robb?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Ordinance number 24, 2020 passes.
Resolution number 41, 2020, accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor.
Move the resolution be taken up and passed.
Second. We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin for the passage of Resolution 41, 2020. Discussion? Mr. Gates.
Mayor, this is housekeeping. This is something that's done after we submit our annual budget to the Budget Commission. They look at it and they send this back. And this is necessary for us to adopt this so that they will then collect the taxes for us next year. So that's needs to be done. There is, I ask unanimous consent for 2 corrections. At the top of the first page, there's a date, September 18th. That 18 should be changed to 21. And then at the bottom of the 3rd page, where it refers to President of Council, the word vice should be inserted there, Vice President of Council. Mayor, again, I ask unanimous consent for those 2 corrections.
Okay. Heard by unanimous consent, Mr. Gates is asking on page 1, the September 18th be changed to September 21st, and on the bottom page 3, instead of President of Council, be Vice President of Council. Are there any objections to those modifications or changes? Hearing none, they should be so made. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robb?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Resolution number 41, 2020 passes.
Resolution number 42, 2020, approving weed assessments as issued by the Director of Public Service and declaring an emergency.
Move the resolution be taken up and passed.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Roberts for the passage of Resolution 42, 2020. Discussion? Mr. Gates.
Very disappointed, these are for last year's mowings. There may well yet be some mowings
discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rob?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Resolution 42, 2020 passes.
Resolution 43, 2020, authorizing the mayor as Director of Public Service to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement and/or Local Transportation Improvement Program, and to execute contracts as required for the City of Shelby Streetscape Project.
Move the resolution be taken up and passed.
Second?
We have a motion by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. Roberts for the passage of Resolution 43, 2020. Discussion, Mr. Geis?
This would, like they said before, I'd never say it's not gonna cost us any money, because we all pay taxes and we all buy gas and so forth, but if this is successful, it would have no out-of-pocket from our city coffers monies for this project if we were to be successful in applying for this. So, as you can see, there was the total project was 1.4 or whatever, so we're asking for $155,000 and change that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Gates?
Mayor, just asking Adam's consent for a couple of typos. Looking at page 4 of 6 at the top, project description, section 4.3, paragraph A. The narrative of this project, the H need not be capitalized. In that same line, Mansfield, there's a typo there. In part B, intersections in the project area, where the project needs to be corrected. And third line there, the project includes needs a correction. And then the next page, Chief Financial Officer 5.2, correction made to Finance Director Crum's email address. Unless he's changed his last name, my notes are all on this. Mayor, again, I ask unanimous consent for those corrections.
Mr. Gates has asked for unanimous consent. Did everyone get all those? I don't think I need to repeat those. Are there any objections to making those corrections by unanimous consent? If not, they will be made as listed. And you certainly get the Eagle Eye Award tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We need to pass that around. We need to get an eagle. Just pass it around. Yeah, Eagle Eye.
Only if one is a Native American.
No. All right. We haven't voted on that yet, have we? All right. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rob?
Yay.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Gates?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Resolution number 43, 2020 passes. Come to miscellaneous business. Any miscellaneous business number 4, council this evening? Mr. Gates.
Mayor, move council adjourned.
Second?
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Roberts for adjournment. Roll call, please.